Hello, and welcome to APG5365 Principles of Global Media and Communications. I'm your unit coordinator, Dr. Karon Dan. For many of you, this unit is the beginning of your Monash journey, so a special welcome to you, whether you're based in Australia or, like many of our students this year, overseas. The best way you can make the most of your experience, even if you're not on campus, is by attending your 3-hour tutorial every week. In that space, you'll meet and interact with your classmates, and I hope we have many inspiring and interesting discussions along our learning journey. This week, I'll talk about the broad approaches in this unit. I won't be discussing the assessments in the lecture videos. That will be an activity for this week's tutorial. Assignments are also explained on Moodle in the assessment section, so make sure you check that out. In this video, I'll explain what the unit entails and its outcomes, and we'll start right in by exploring a key debate at the heart of the unit concerning the relationship between globalization and communications. The purpose of this unit is as a foundation for your Masters by Coursework degree. Here, you'll learn some of the essential skills and knowledge you'll need in your journey towards understanding the field of media and communications. This unit will help you form a basic knowledge that will allow you to understand the different approaches in the field and thereby inform the more advanced study you will do as you proceed in your degree. We can start by looking at the learning outcomes. These are also in the handbook. Firstly, identify and analyse core concepts and theories underpinning contemporary media and communications approaches. Second, read and critically analyse scholarly publications in media and communications. At first, I can warn you that these might seem very difficult. They're very difficult for everyone to read, but there's a way of reading actively, and as the learning outcome says, reading critically, that will help you along the way to really understanding what it is researchers think about and write about media and communications. Third, to critically appraise the relationship between theory and practice in the field of media and communications. And fourth, to discuss and critically evaluate the role of media and communications in contemporary global societies and its relationship with a range of different sectors from local to global levels. Let's start with the unit's title, Principles of Global Media and Communications. This title will give you clues as to what it's about, but all the terms in this title are very broad, so let's examine them more closely. Firstly, what are principles? Very briefly, principles are the foundations governing a system. So they encompass theories that explain the nature or try to explain the nature of a field of study. We can apply these principles to practices in a field, such as media and communications. And in this way, principles provide a link between theory and practice. If you've studied science at all, you will have come across the idea of principles. One example is Isaac Newton's third law of physics, that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. There are, of course, exceptions to just about every principle, and it's often these exceptions that interest researchers. But it's also the way that phenomena follow the principles. Research often looks for patterns in behaviour, in phenomena, and in culture. Next, what are media and communications? The term media, of course, is the plural of medium. It's originally a Latin word for middle. It refers to something, therefore, that comes between the sender and the receiver of a message. Newspapers, books, films, radio broadcasts, and social media apps are all examples. You will also hear the term the media often used as a collective noun, and most usually referring to means of mass communication, such as the internet today, and in legacy media, newspapers and magazines. The term communications is interrelated, but is sometimes more complex. In this unit, we are interested in communications in two main ways. Firstly, as systems of communication, that is, how messages are distributed and the role of mass communications and technology, such as TV, broadcasting, and newspaper publishing. And note that when I talk about broadcasting in general, we refer in English to television and radio. Secondly, communications with an S as the study of communication, the singular form. That is, who communicates what, to whom, with what content, and with what effect. This refers to the study of the relationship between media and culture by looking at the production, distribution, and reception of media texts. Now, a text is any media product that can be consumed. For example, a TV show, an ad, a film, a book, a song, or a video. So in communications and media studies, we use this term in a broader sense, and not in the more narrow sense you might have come across, say, in literary studies where a text might refer to something that is written only. You'll notice the unit title is communications with an S, the plural form. In popular use, the terms communications and communication are somewhat interchangeable and often used without attention to the differences. That's okay, but if you want to be exact, the communications term in our unit title means we are looking at the study of communications and its systems. So the analysis of its importance to human societies and where challenges and problems lie as technology disrupts those communication fields. Communication in its singular form properly applies to the everyday transfer of messages from one party or entity to another. So conversation between individuals or between social groups, connection within society or between societies, and it doesn't necessarily involve an exterior medium. So it's really a more general term. Don't worry too much about the differences though. I just wanted to explain the connection and why you will come across both words in the course of your studies. So, thirdly, what are global media and communications? This has several different layers of meaning, referring to many different types of communication. Basically, we acknowledge that the study of communication is not just influenced by the here and now, or by what is immediately around our geographical location. Global media and communications can refer to a study of the content of media internationally, how that media is interrelated, who it was made for and how it was made by, and how the local connects with the global, known as the global-local nexus. Let's start our examination of the subject of this unit by looking at some broad streams of inquiry into the nature of global communications. In today's digitized world, media flows are fluid and technically can cross borders. They have the potential to reach just about anyone, almost anywhere. Yet we know that only about 63% of the world's population uses the internet. These statistics are from Internet World Stats and they are valid as of December the 31st, 2020. So this is not because there is no way they could connect to the internet. Actually, only about 10% or even maybe less of the world's people live in places that would not be able to connect to the internet in any way. As in, where they live is not covered by any sort of satellite, phone line, or other technology that would get coverage. So the main reason billions of the world's people are not part of cross-border media flows is something other than technology-based challenges. Usually it's for political or economic reasons, for example. A question to consider is, how can culture be inclusive and encourage communication that connects people and truly transcends boundaries? The answer might lie in thinking in terms of cultural life, rather than in terms of separate cultures. So the term culture as a separate entity encourages an us versus them approach, a divide, categorize and rule idea. Think of colonialism. So this is when one country takes over another for its own good, purportedly, often categorizing its people as other or less capable beings who need to be ruled by their superiors. And there's a lot of academic research on colonialism. So the construction of a national culture can be said to be cultural insiderism, a way of promoting, as I mentioned before, an us and them atmosphere that is central to nationalism. Consider, for example, the Australian government's push over the last few years to make becoming an Australian citizen more difficult, to ensure the promotion of what is termed Australian values. But in a country such as Australia, with one of the most highly multicultural populations on Earth, and also the oldest living continuous civilization on Earth and its Indigenous people, what exactly are these Australian values, and who gets to decide what is and is not Australian? A different way of thinking is to consider cultural life and culture as a broad term, so inclusive rather than exclusive. These terms are related to the idea that we are connected in our everyday lives to and by the arts, and today this is greatly facilitated by media, particularly social media. If you're interested in this area, you can access a book chapter on it by the scholar Nick Caldry online via the Monash Library. The details are on the slide. Something to think about as you proceed with this unit are the following questions. Do social media promote shared culture globally? Or do they lead to further division and nationalization of cultures? Even though technically, knowledge in the world today has the potential to be shared with more than half the world's population via the internet. And how can we use media culture to promote inclusiveness for all people and rational discussion rather than an exclusivity, division, and polarization? This is of particular importance as we consider the political and social situation in the United States currently, and also the situation around the world of information, misinformation, and disinformation surrounding the pandemic. For many centuries, people have been crossing the world in search of better lives, financial opportunity, freedom to escape war, and for many other reasons, including by force, such as happened with the slave trade. And from 1788 to 1886, 164,000 convicts were sent to Australia as their penalty for committing crimes in the UK. This penalty imposed by the courts was called transportation. Before modern transport and communications, a trip across the world as an immigrant was usually a one-way journey for reasons of both time and space, plus economic considerations. You would set off on a ship knowing that you would probably never see your family or friends in the old country again. Even if you did go home, you would not be able to do so in a hurry, and perhaps you would not be able to afford to anyway. Even if you traveled for your job, such as if you were a sailor, a soldier, or a trader, you could be away from your family for 5 or 7 years at a time, maybe even longer. Even letters took many months or even years to reach their destination across the world. Until very recently, when the pandemic halted most world travel, especially that for tourism and voluntary immigration, one of the things that is distinctly different about movements of population today is that there are multiple mobilities. Many of us, students and staff in this unit, have travelled widely, even living in countries other than your own. I've lived in 5 countries in my lifetime. Because so much of the world's economic and cultural systems have been based on mobility, restrictions to that mobility, as has happened in the last year, create serious and long-lasting tensions, problems and challenges on so many levels, and radical changes to established systems. These will be some of the things we think about in this unit. In the meantime, I draw your attention to the picture on the slide. This Korean couple in a long-distance relationship between Seoul and New York decided in 2017 to splice their photos together to look like they were in the one place, but to subtly point out the similarities and differences of their experience. Then they posted them online and it went viral. They look almost like they're together, but they're not. And this says something about the power of social media. But they're also making a comment that the world is one place with more similarities than differences. This happened before the pandemic, and it becomes now somewhat ironic in that for so many people, separation such as this from loved ones has become the norm over the last year. Many of you will be able to identify with this, I'm sure. It is the existence of power of global media that has enabled us to stay together in a virtual way, even when physically we are apart. Interestingly, their video was sponsored by Korean Air at the time, and it's an example of native advertising. This means ads that are disguised as content, in this case on CNN's social video network, Great Big Story. If you would like to see more of this couple's story, there are links on the slides. All the slides, including those used for tutorials, can be found in the weekly content on Moodle. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next video.